This is Morgan Creasel reporting for NewsJunkie.net. I'm here with Jessamyn West. Jessamyn West is a library technologist and writer. She's the community manager for the Flickr Foundation, and she works at the local library branches in her home state of Vermont. Jessamyn led the Internet Archive's Open Library Project. She was a research fellow at Harvard's Library Innovation Lab, and she has served as a counselor with the American Library Association. She's also run the librarian.net blog since 1999. How you doing today, Jessamyn?
Pretty good. Wow. It just sounds like such a long time ago.
It was party time. Who can remember that year?
Right, right. You were not born.
I was
I
not,
knew,
no.
I knew it.
But I hear it was a good time. So I wanted to start out by asking your vision for the future of libraries in your dream scenario. What does that look like?
In my dream scenario, libraries get funded like the important social infrastructure that they are. They are not interfered with by other people who think they know how to do our jobs better than we do. They are a huge distributed network of information, helping all people, everyone, getting access to all the information that they want, as well as clean gender neutral bathrooms and Wi-Fi and heat in the winter and coolness in the summer. And we're powerful and appreciated for doing the good work that we've been doing in this country since this country was a country.
I feel like libraries as a place in the community have been going through some struggles lately. Yeah. So we have the Institute of Museum and Library Services being threatened of elimination, trying to defund them every year. We also have libraries generally trying to struggle to adapt in the digital age.
Some are better than others.
Interesting. Tell me more about that. Like, what are libraries trying and what are kind of the barriers that they're facing?
I mean, I think, the digital divide is like a general issue, right? Which is not so much, do you have access to a computer or do you have access to internet? Although those are still things people struggle with. But like, do people really even understand what they're doing when they're interacting on the internet? Like, as someone who
Mm.
grew up before the internet, we learned it as we got it. But I feel like when people have grown up with it their whole lives, it's just the water, this is water situation where like it's just all around you. As a result, people have challenges differentiating doing stuff online from the companies that facilitate us doing stuff online. If you have a cell phone, you're paying some company for that access and they have certain control over that access, which you may or may not be aware is happening. If you have internet at your home, you are paying for that. Internet at your home is really different than internet on your device for legal reasons that I think are really important. In libraries, we get that and we often help people dealing with that really complicated situation. I help people use computers for a job at my library and love it. I can teach your mom, your grandma, whatever to do anything on a computer. But that's different from understanding the entire information ecosystem, which right now, especially, is under threat from a lot of different directions, right? Like people who think if you read a book on gay penguins, it's going to make your kid gay, to which I respond, who cares? But also, it's not true. But also, we're seeing this administration go after E-rate, which is one of the ways that libraries, public libraries, get discounted access to the internet, which allows us to offer internet access to our patrons. We're also seeing threats against knowledge. We're seeing misinformation issues, both with people's use of AI. It's a bullshit generator at some level. It can be helpful for certain things, but there's also social and environmental costs that are huge. And that's new for me personally, because I live in rural Vermont and people use it because it comes up all the time, but they're not using it for work as much. But also, a lot of people don't understand that aspect of it exactly, right? Like, I know sort of how an LLM works personally, but I had to kind of go out and figure that out because the LLM is not going to tell you how the LLM works, but it's going to tell you that whatever you think about it is totally correct and then string a bunch of words together, right? And I feel weird being this person because there's a narrative being pushed that's a big, well-funded narrative. There are a lot of big, well-funded narratives that are being pushed that I think are not correct. And it feels weird to be like the kind of the guy slaying the dragon. I don't want that to be my whole job. I just want to teach people how to use computers. But in order to do that, you have to do a whole bunch of stuff to get the foundation for the infrastructure for that. And different libraries are differently positioned, whether it's resources or the population that they're working with, or the people from on high who are telling them what to do at their local library. You mentioned that I work at a branch. We're in a place where we don't even have branches. I work for my town's library. We get
Okay.
funded by our town, and it's been this 6-month fight. My town loves reading, libraries, everything else, but our staff is underpaid. And so there's a big fight about whether you should pay the staff the amount that they deserve to get paid with the amount of education they have versus the town is struggling, financially. But they do wind up paying for the cops. So there's a lot, but I think it's not as much staying relevant, although that's part of it. But I think the bigger issue is having people understand that the information and the neutrality is the wrong word. I am so sorry I said neutrality. Like for a long time, the push was, oh, libraries, we're neutral. We'll get you books on anything. And over time, especially with people having a better social justice lens on the world and the role of libraries in a society or in a democracy, we've moved away from, oh, yeah, we're neutral. You can have a book about like, it's great to be gay, and another book that's like, it is not. And that's not actually the way to advance a society. It's okay to say
Yeah.
that some ideas are supported by science, like as we were talking about earlier, or research, or how do we know some things? That whole epistemology of what do we know about knowledge. Our institution is one of the better institutions for helping you out with that, but people need to understand that that's the case. And we're not always, as a profession, the ones that are gonna get out in front of it and launch a big PR campaign. We just assume people will get it. And I think that's been the thing we've been struggling with the most, right? Like, of course, everybody thinks the library is a good idea. Well, you know what? They don't. They really don't. And especially with big narratives getting pushed from high levels of government, even against other levels of government, right? We saw Trump fire the Librarian of Congress. How dare he? She was as opposed to the Registrar of Copyrights, who he also fired, who fought for her job tooth and nail and still has it, which is amazing. If you're a Perlmutter, you are incredible. I think that's the real struggle, right? I think there are people who want to control information in order to consolidate their own wealth and power. And we're fighting them while also just trying to keep the lights on, the doors open, and giving you something good to read. Challenging.
There's a couple things in that I want to yank on, a couple threads. I feel like a similarity between libraries and journalism is what you're talking about with neutrality, or we talk about being objective in journalism, where that was a big focus for a long time.
Sure.
And we're starting to have this, like, what do you call it? I want to say comeuppance, but that's not the word I'm looking for. Looking back at it and realizing that there is no such thing as objectivity. And when you are doing this both sides thing, you are often falsely giving weight to something that is wrong and damaging. So
There's no death penalty debate in the larger world. We act like it's a on the one hand, on the other hand thing in America because we grew up having it. But yeah, same thing.
yeah, and climate
I
change,
absolutely understand it. Lots of issues.
right?
Equal marriage, no debate.
Yeah, there's I don't know, the protecting truth and research thing, or protecting truth and science and fact thing has to be more important than pretending like everything is a two-sided debate. I think that's a really good point for the knowledge sector internally, this professional sphere of research and keeping knowledge journalism too, where it can't really be about neutrality. So you said libraries are a really good place for fighting these narratives that people are trying to push on us. Why are libraries that kind of a place?
Because one of the things that's very interesting about public libraries in the United States is that in most cases, though not all, if you work at a library, you ostensibly work for the government. right? Like you're a public servant. And that used to be, you can trust me, I work for the government.
Mm.
But now there's more like, I might get paid by the government, but I'm here to help you understand what's really happening, even if it sometimes means I have to talk against the government. Like there's a certain extent to which the positioning of libraries as this is where you get information to answer your own questions. And what we are going to help you with is finding like access to good information. And I don't mean good information like the best books, which used to be an American Library Association slogan, still is, but we're distancing ourselves from it. You've got a question about your life. It would be helped by you knowing more stuff. We're going to help you get the stuff you need and give you advice on what's good information. And nobody's paying us to say it a certain way. Right? We're
Right.
not your special friend that's going to be like, every haircut you get looks amazing, like ChatGPT is going to. We're going to really try to help you figure it out. And it's tricky, right? Because there are situations in which the public librarian is not the most well positioned person to help you with your health issue necessarily, right? Like, does this look infected to you kind of thing? But they can tell you the information that you get from National Institute of Health, maybe not CDC, is going to be more reliable than somebody who's trying to sell you anti-elbow infection medicine, right? We have the ability to help you with critical thinking that doesn't quite tell you what to believe. And I think that's important. And like I said before, I harp on this because I am aggressive about it. We're for everyone, right? Like it's very hard, especially nowadays in the middle of 2026, to find institutions that are both governmental, I guess, but that also try hard to serve everyone. Like we have municipal government in my town. There's 4,500 people in my town, and I think those people serve everyone, right? I even think my local police try and believe they're serving everyone. But I think if you ask people nationwide if they feel like the police, who are the government, serve them, I think more and more you're going to find people saying, no, I don't feel like they do. I feel like there are certain problems with the way this job is done in America and the people who choose to do this job in America in a way that I don't think you see as much in librarianship and science and a lot of the other knowledge professions. I'm really interested in what you were saying about zoos because I'm like, oh, tell me
Mhm.
more. I think the other thing that people don't think about with libraries is we're everywhere. Every place there are people, you'll find libraries. You'll find them in rich communities, you'll find them in poor communities. They're often very different libraries, but the gist of what they're trying to do and what they're trying to help with, there's definitely different kinds of resources. The gist of what they're trying to do is the same. One of the things that's been so challenging in the last year or two is certain states in the United States are turning on their libraries in a way that I would not have expected 10 years earlier. I'm in Vermont. You're pretty protected at a state level from some of the insults that have been sent against libraries in cities in Idaho, cities in Louisiana. But some states are just turning on their libraries and saying, we don't trust you to do the job. We're going to let legislators do your job of telling kids what's appropriate for them to read or telling teenagers what's appropriate for them to look at. It's garbage, but it's very state by state, and it's very hard for libraries to unite because we're dealing with different challenges, and we've always dealt with slightly different challenges, but historically the challenges have been pretty similar, and now the challenges are absolutely different state by state. I mean, they
Wow.
didn't used to be in my lifetime. I'm sure they have been in the past.
So, just to summarize what you were saying, the reason that libraries are good at this, helping people figure out what's what, is because it was set up as a public service. You got no ulterior motive. You're not trying to sell something. The objective of the library is to help. And it's very accessible. It's often maybe the only accessible place that people can go to get that kind of thing. That makes a lot of
Or
sense as well.
church, which maybe is trying to sell you something. Like,
Mhm.
I don't mean to be shitty about it, but like It's not necessarily for everyone the way the public library is for everyone.
So, I mean, I feel like we can kind of have a hypothesis of why certain states, why the federal government under an authoritarian regime would attack libraries. What is your take on why certain states are being hostile, why the federal government is being hostile? Why would you attack libraries?
I see it as being sort of a way of consolidating control, honestly, right? I think that's what makes me the most upset about it is I really feel like for the people for whom this is a top level issue for them, messing with libraries and trans kids in sports, like other things, like they just are trying they don't even care, right? They've never met a trans kid. They don't care about small town America. They care about money, they care about power, and finding issues that you could consolidate your base around, which is awful to even think about that kids are getting stuck in the middle of this, is a way to consolidate control, right? You start to, you've got an opinion that it would be better if women didn't shoot their mouth off so much and then you turn it into a policy. And I think a lot of it's about voting because that's about consolidating control. I think a lot of it's about money because a lot of people are very greedy about when they think they have enough and how they think other people should or should not have led their lives that led them to this point, and they're very judgmental. I think you can tell a story that's a lie, but a compelling story that, people who are poor, this is a lie. This is not a true thing. Sound bites are problematic sometimes, but, oh, people who are poor made bad choices, as opposed to people who are poor are trapped in this institutional poverty cycle, or people who are
Right.
who are in prison, who are incarcerated. You can weave a lie that says they did something. Marijuana is now legal in that state, but you did not let the people who were in jail for dealing out. Shame
Mhm.
on you. It's terrible. And so I see a lot of it as just being a bastardization of Christianity. Jesus would never have done this. Jesus would have worked in the library. I don't care. Like, and a bastardization of like, no, not a bastardization, an absolute flat on, like just white nationalist thing because people are afraid that like America, which was founded on this kind of fucked up dream to begin with, is actually becoming a very diverse and interesting and rich nation, despite the fact that one group of kind of angry white people would really like it to be different, right? And so, like, we've become a nation that creates billionaires in a way that is creepy, and we don't have enough people asking questions about why that's even allowed when people are hungry, basically.
So, do you think it's more of like a kind of unintentional casualty, or not unintentional? It's intentional, but like
Yeah.
just because it's convenient to kind of take funding away from libraries to kind of use it as like a liberal establishment, whatever? Or is it more of a targeted thing of like, this is where people go to get information we don't want them to have?
I think it's both. Like I was saying about trans kids in sports, right? You look at the numbers, and there's so few kids that a lot of this shitty legislation is going after from people who don't know the population that they're talking about at all. But if you go to my library, my town of 4,500 people, you can read 100 books about transgender issues from a number of perspectives, right? You can read about body dysphoria. You can read about body euphoria. You can read about gay penguins. You can read about, hey, my brother is trans and this was what our journey was like. You can read about trans teenagers who are just living their life, just being who they are. And I think it gives you perspective that the people who are pushing these really terrible narratives of control and consolidation of power and whatever the heck it is would prefer you didn't have access to, right? And so it's a combination of access to resources because even in my little community, you can get a lot of books about the larger world that you might not be able to inform yourself about if your TV was always turned on to Fox News, which I think just called us drug dens of sex orgy. They went after librarians in the funniest way because we were all
Hmm.
like, great, you make us look much cooler than we are. But
Right.
yeah, I think it's a control thing. And I also think putting libraries on the back foot means they're not spending as much time just doing cool stuff for the community. You
Mm,
know, we're wasting all of our damn time fighting with small minded people when we could just be out doing our cool jobs. And
right.
also with libraries, if you start making them afraid of like having like YA books on whatever topic, that reduces the market for people who are writing about those topics. I subscribe to the notion that everybody, you're just pre-disabled, right? Like I think for a lot of us, various either temporary or permanent disabilities, or a lot of people work with invisible disabilities, but you can read more stories about people who are not like you in whatever way that is at the library. And the library is one of the biggest purchasers of books in this country, the public library system as a whole, even though we're a big distributed system. And I worry about the market for some of
Mm,
those very niche books where otherwise you'd be like, well, every library is going to buy this book, right? But would every parent? Who knows? And I think
wow.
Reagan gave us all trickle down economics, which don't work. The trickle down effect of having books for gay teenagers in every community in America is really powerful. Shutting that off suddenly shuts off a bunch of people from information that they might not be able to get in other ways, right? Where major media isn't saying it, they don't have a local newspaper anymore, and the radio is all owned by a small amount of companies. It's hard, right? YouTube is always trying to push all the awful things. Like if you use YouTube as a brand new user, they're like, would you like to learn more about incel culture? And you're like, not really, thanks.
Yeah.
It's a problem. And because all the people who own these companies, the super rich, understand that sort of engagement and aggravation drive more people to use their tools more and not interact with their real world communities, it all becomes part of this hegemony of gearing more people towards using fewer things that are owned by fewer people who are getting richer and richer.
Gotcha. Yeah, that's a point about going after the books that libraries would buy or hobbling publishers of really valuable resources, but things that wouldn't probably sell as well. That's something I haven't thought of, but that's a really good point. You said something earlier about we've become a more diverse nation. And I'm wondering if that is also part of this too. Do libraries help communities understand themselves? And if that is attacked, or on the other side, maybe libraries can lean into this more. Hey, this is the actual community that we live in. It's more diverse and it's more interesting than you think. It's not all one thing. I'm curious about how do libraries help communities understand themselves? Can that be leaned into more as the white nationalist narrative is being pushed harder and harder?
One of my favorite kind of library stories is this community is so much more diverse than you think. Everybody talks about Vermont and they're like, oh, it's so white. Census wise, that's true and it's a problem. It, that doesn't mean the community isn't more diverse than that, right? Than you think if you just read the, oh, Vermont's so white narrative. There's a lot of class diversity in Vermont that I think people don't pay as much attention to. But if you talk about it, suddenly it's a thing we can talk about. Like Americans are historically shitty at talking about money and mixed about talking about difference in general. But I think one of the things about just celebrating diversity in general is talking about diversity, right? Like I work at my library, I'm the only Jewish librarian, right? And I'm not super Jewish, but you don't have to be, which is what's great about Judaism. But
Mm,
so as a result, around holiday times, I'll often pipe up a little bit more than I might normally because I do think it's important for people to see people in positions of power. It's weird, right? I don't think of myself as a powerful person, but I work for the government. I'm
mhm.
talking to the media. I have a job working for the town that can distribute information. And so when I talk about, I don't really celebrate Christmas, maybe somebody who hates Christmas feels more permission to not do Christmas, right? And I'm not trying to be like, oh, everybody needs to celebrate Hanukkah, but there's lots of ways to be a person, but you see the big ones all the time, right? You see them on the street, you see them on the TV, you see them in the media. Aggravation drives engagement online and in social spaces. A lot of this kind of community celebration can drive homogeneity, but it doesn't have to. We're in the middle of World Cup stuff going on, and it has been amazing. People know so much more about Cabo Verde this week than they did 3 months ago because of the World Cup and because people got excited about celebrating together. Or
Mm.
they know more about Scotland, or they know more about Morocco. And the Olympics kind of does this a little. Olympics are a little weird because there's a lot of flag wavy USA stuff in a way
Mhm.
that you don't get as much with soccer because we're not as good at soccer. Watching that happen and being like, yes, hey, did you know we have people from Cape Verde in our community? I don't think we
Mhm.
do, but we definitely have people from some of the other countries that are represented in the World Cup and letting people know that. And of course, under Trump's America, it's not always safe to say you're in this part of the community. So sometimes you have to
Right.
speak in generalities instead of specific ones. So you're not going to be like, hey, this is Hector and he's from Cape Verde and he works on the farm. But you can talk sort of in general. And one of the things Vermont, I've been really proud of them, is ice is the worst. And we have had one major ugly ice situation in Vermont, but only one. And we've got a detention center, which we shouldn't have. And we've got cops that are working with them, which they shouldn't be doing. And we've got people in Vermont who work for, because we've got a border with Canada, which we shouldn't. Vermont, this is my favorite fact. Vermont was an independent republic longer than ICE has been around. People talk about the Confederacy a lot because it was 4 years, 4 years old, but other things that have just not been around, but that feel inevitable to people. For a lot of people, they
Mhm.
feel like ICE has always been with us, and it really hasn't. It can be challenging to be like, let's tell the stories of everybody in the community when some people do not feel safe telling their stories. But one of the things the library can be is a proxy for those stories. Like, we can have drag story hour at our library, and that doesn't necessarily mean pointing to anybody in our immediate community. It's people who feel safe with that part of themselves and who are thumbing their nose at being like, yes, everybody wants to be fabulous and play dress up. That's the message, even though it makes certain other people aggravated. Well, tough shit.
Right.
It's always straight white man day at the farm, but we're having drag queen hour at the library. It's fine. I think there's a lot of different ways to be a person, and they're all mostly, if they're not oppressing other people, okay.
Mm.
And then you can help support people without necessarily having to talk about them specifically because they may not feel comfortable with it, right? Like having
Yeah.
gender neutral restrooms and being aggressive about it doesn't say anything against anybody. It's how the bathrooms work. Makes sense. Who cares? We're the library, we're the government. Enjoy it.
That's really great. The proxy for people who might feel uncomfortable or could be targeted for speaking out is really important and kind of saying like, hey, these people belong in our community, I think is huge. I like that. And I think like you were saying it position of power, but that's not quite the right term. I feel like maybe position of influence
Influence
is.
trust, which is one of the things the church can do if you've got kind of a progressive. We have a pretty progressive Christian church in my town, and I should mention, I'm not talking shit about them. But if you are the church and you're incredibly progressive, you can use it as an opportunity to speak out against the churches who are not progressive because you're in a position of trust because you are also the church, right? Like,
Mhm.
I don't know anything about popes really, but I know that watching this pope come out with proclamations about how he feels that are progressive, even though Catholicism historically not that, has been good, right? Even if we can say, I feel weird about the church, we can also say, I do appreciate them sticking their neck out and sticking up for people who could use somebody in a position of trust to speak out for them, right?
Yeah.
And I think that's true with the library. I think it's also true for other institutions. The library has historically been a little problematic, but not majorly problematic, like the Dewey Decimal System. Problematic, but like working on it sort of we are, but also, yeah, we can support other people in our community And the more we say it, the more we make it true, sort of the same way the more you spend time on Twitter, the more you believe some of the nonsense people are talking about, right?
Mhm.
About it moves your window of what you think acceptable discourse can be because everybody's being weird and awful and it's very tech bro heavy and it's weird. Library is kind of the antidote to that in some ways when we can be. We don't have a big megaphone. Many libraries do not have much of a social game, if any. And I think that's where a lot of people, especially younger people, get more of their information. We should be in more places so that we can get our message out and not just assume people are going to walk in our front door.
So you said the stories of libraries like representing their communities are some of your favorites. Can you think of any specific stories or examples of that?
We have a library that's near me over the mountain. It's called Orwell, which is funny with all the stuff we're talking about. But they did a project called the Speakers Bureau, and it would just be like anybody in town who had a thing they were good at, they could keep a list of like who can come talk about beekeeping, who can come talk about geothermal engineering, who can go talk about what it's like to be the one older Black lady in town, whether it's like a social sort of identity based thing or sort of a information, let me just info dump on you. With my friends, we all talk about like, it's like our special interests, right? I'm really lucky in that the thing that is my special interest is also the thing I can do for my job. Sometimes it's hard for me to talk and think at the same time. It's my one problem.
I feel that.
But I do feel like rolling your community feedback back into what it is to actually be a library. One of my favorite projects I've seen a library do is the Burlington's our biggest city and it's 30,000 people. It's just not
Yes.
big. They were open on Thanksgiving one year and they gave out meals to people who maybe didn't have a Thanksgiving plan. And they were like, we're all in this community. And if anyone is hungry, none of us are fed. And so they stayed open. Certain staff members kind of sacrificed some of their own time. But from an equity perspective, everyone should get dinner on Thanksgiving. The library decided to stay open, worked with community organizations, boxed up meals. You could take stuff out. And it just let the community feel like, even if they weren't necessarily helping, they were helping because they support the library and their funding. Sometimes you can just support that the institution exists and watch them do their good works and be like, I helped. I feel like I'm
Mm.
part of that. Whereas I don't think people feel that way as much about other civic organizations. I've become part of a group of rabble rousers that goes to all the select board meetings and learns what all the committees do and how governance happens at a small level. And it's super challenging, right? Part of us going is witnessing and taking those stories. Do you even know how the library budget gets funded? Let me tell you it in a way you don't have to sit through a 3-hour meeting. We can all be smarter because some people, that's their special interest or their area. Encouraging that as a way to be a person. The library does it, but the library is also like, you can do this. Do a public records request. There's actually a lot of ways in which the structure of laws does support democracy, even if we're not seeing it happen at the higher levels of government. Make a public records request. Ask the cops how many cameras are in town. And then once you figure out, tell people, did you know there's 28 cameras in town? How do you feel about that? If you don't feel good about it, we should have a conversation encouraging people to be part of their communities. Maybe it's just getting a library card. I don't care. I don't think there's one right way to do it, but being involved, if you would prefer things to be different, is an important part of, I mean, everybody can point to Mamdani and be like, oh my God, what he's gotten done is amazing. Some of what he's done is just deciding and getting to a position of power where he could actually do something about it, right? Yes and no, right? He made promises about the library that people had to hold his feet to the fire to follow up on. But some of it was just decisions he made because he was in a position of power, and people at the library can do similar things, or even people who are a member of the public. It's kind of important to be aware of your own power so that you can wield it in a way that's helpful, especially if you don't like how things are going.
Yeah, so much time and energy is spent on making us feel helpless. It's really important to remember, hey, there are things that I can do. And you're talking about how a lot of these library services and programs and things like the Thanksgiving thing is making it accessible to people, which I think is huge. That's kind of part of why things like libraries, museums, zoos are intriguing to me right now, is because they are kind of accessibility first academic adjacent institutions, where I feel like the reason that it has been so easy for the administration to turn people against universities is because they're much more elite, non-accessible.
They feel like they are.
So
My
I
partner works at Harvard, and oh my God.
that accessibility thing is really important. My theory is that leaning more into that angle of it, and especially through these institutions, I've been calling them bridge institutions in my head, is the way to get that sense of community back and that sense of like, well, knowledge is for everyone. You are not limited to scrolling on your phone. There's other ways that you can learn things.
Yeah, and I think learning things through your phone is also important. The sort of sneering tone with which large groups of online people who actually themselves can affect social change as a group. I mean, people do talk about slacktivism, and you can feel like you're participating and helping, but all you're doing is sending memes around. That's a problem. A
Mhm.
little bit, but I really think people have to be like, I try to be positive about any effort people want to put into literally anything, because everyone is struggling, especially now. Like, even people who support this administration mostly aren't really doing that great.
Yeah.
It's just challenging. And then there's other larger climate issues and international issues going on in other countries that we care about personally or because of whatever our identity groups are. And I think encouraging people that they can make a difference, but being specific about what difference is, right? Sometimes it's just supporting trans kids in sports on social media. Cool. Trans
Mhm.
kids need support, right? Internet community. You're also familiar with your local community because they are still affecting certain aspects of your life that really are geographically bounded, and they're responsible to you the same way you're responsible to them, right? I think about my water system, right? We've got a local water department, and that's where our water comes from. It's important to understand that as we're thinking about microplastics. Some of that starts with our local water department giving a shit about certain things. And the way to do that is to talk to Chris, who runs it. Chris is the key.
We need to know
Yeah,
who Chris is.
yeah. People kind of lump Chris in with the government and all those people, like, what can I do? I voted and now it didn't go my way. And I think being, as a bridged institution, being like, well, there are some things, and let's talk about what your capacity is and what you feel like you. I have a friend who's got mobility issues. We went to this party to support a candidate who we would like to get elected because he's amazing, but the guy he's running against is a problem. She doesn't think she's got the capacity for door knocking and was beating herself up about it. And I was like, don't spend any time on that. Let's talk about what you
Mhm.
can do or what you
Yeah.
want or how you feel like we're doing. I'm sorry if you feel bad. And if you want to talk about that differently, let's talk about that. Let's be supportive. But think about not what you can't do, but what you can do. Assume everybody else is dealing with their own stuff and keeping your nose out of their situation too. Because I do think there's a lot of people who can be judgmental about the way other people decide to interact with the world. And I think the online world encourages that. I think this administration encourages that. But if the World Cup, people coming together for different things. We have more similarities than differences. And I don't say that in order to downplay the people who are terrible and should stop. But I do think most people want a fair society, a just society, an equitable society, even if it's a lift for them. I'm okay with having less if other people have enough. Getting that message across more and more, I do feel slowly helps. It helps slowly. It helps not the way I feel like it should. Like if billionaires just decide, I mean, we look at Mackenzie Scott, right? Like she can't give her money away fast enough. And she reflects her values in the places she chooses to give her money or her time. And you can substitute money for time, for attention, for caring, for empathy. It's Disability Pride Month. I'm spending a little bit of time finding the disability in libraries overlaps and finding interesting things that people can learn about, posting them to social media if people are interested.
Yeah.
Not a lot of time, but I could be spending that time on Instagram getting mad. My Instagram is mostly home inspection videos and like, you don't even want to know. Vermont shit, dumb shit. But it's my dumb shit and I love it. But like thinking about that, take 5 or 10 minutes out of your social media diet and do a thing that might help raise visibility, raise awareness, help somebody in your neighborhood, talk to Chris,
Mhm.
whatever it is, help the library. It has a multiplier effect and that can be really cool.
Yeah, yeah, I like that a lot. Let's talk about what you can do.
I don't mean to be chirpy about it because I know it can be used as a weapon and I don't mean it that way.
Right, yeah, yeah. It's let's work together to figure out how to do what you want, right? How to get what you want accomplished done with your limitations.
Well,
I like
and
that.
working together can also really mean, and it's a thing the left has a little bit of a hard time with, like you see the conservative right, like they are lockstep about things, and
Mhm.
you can't imagine they actually agree on this, but they all want power, they all want control, and they shut up about the rest of it. I feel like sometimes on the left that can be really challenging where we agree on 95% of the thing, but that 5% feels really important. But it sometimes can mean we spend more time there that's not helping get the ball down the field.
And I really like that point too about like it's not digital community or physical community. It's both and can be helpful.
Organizing is incredible. As someone who was a little radical in high school, we didn't have that. It's amazing to me that you can gather a posse online to go do a thing. I know
Mhm.
people give Indivisible a lot of shit because it's a lot of show up and protest and wave a flag, but are you actually supporting candidates that do your thing? By and large, they don't. That's not their thing. Being able to organize online sometimes, as somebody who works at the libraries, I am shocked at the amount of personal information people are willing to give online to anybody who they identify as being aligned with their beliefs. Just being able to organize, it's incredible the things you can do with a Google Doc and a spreadsheet.
Mhm.
But the amount of organizing that you can do and use technology as a multiplier is incredible. And it's great to see people really wielding that effectively. Again, that was part of Mamdani's game, right? He personally is just like an Energizer bunny who can't stop, won't stop, and also appears to have a genuinely good attitude. But they also got the message out to many different people, many of whom just use social media. And he showed up there being cool. And you were like, oh, interesting. Free bus? Huh. Hadn't really thought about it. Or got people out to vote. Getting people out to vote is hard. They
Mhm.
don't want to, they don't see it as effective. We had our library budget, which should have been voted down. It's complicated, but trust me, should have been voted down, and it got voted down by 18 votes. I could
Mhm.
probably list those people. We worked on that. The good news is we're going to get another budget and it'll be fine. We wanted the budget to be voted down because there were some problems with it. But
Mhm.
like 18 people, you can round those people up on Instagram or even probably Twitter. Maybe not in my community, but maybe. I don't know.
Yeah.
But a lot of the organizing that I know a lot of us did was like email plus door knocking plus social media plus all of it. And it
Mhm.
takes all of us. That was always like Angela Davis's big thing. We need everybody in this movement in order to fight against fascism and fight against like white nationalism. And not everybody can do all the work, but everybody can probably do something.
Yeah, and it's like it goes into that accessibility thing you're talking about, where if you cut off social media because you don't like it, you're cutting
Sure,
off all of those people.
sure. And like some people will probably be that way, and that's okay. But it is a real part of sort of how people get their information now. So you do it at your peril.
Gotcha. Okay, so we talked about The Speakers Bureau. What library was that at again?
Orwell Public Library.
Orwell.
I'm not
Okay.
even sure if they're still doing it. This was like a project they used to do, and I fell so hard in love with it at the time. I
Yeah.
have no idea. But the Burlington Thanksgiving thing was more recent. I feel like it was post COVID, although 100% sure.
That's awesome. I love that. And I told you a little bit about the LA Public Library's Oral History Project,
Love it.
which, yeah, to me, that's kind of related of bringing in knowledge from the community and giving it a new channel. In LA's case, it's creating more information, more history that can be used for other research projects, which is really exciting to me. I think that is huge, especially as we see social science programs funded by the federal government be cut. I'm wondering if libraries can take up some of that, pick up some of the slack there. And is there a possibility for more of these programs? Is that something you're hearing about in library spaces? Have you heard of more programs like that?
I mean, that's kind of what IMLS helps us do, right? Like
Mhm.
the Institute for Museum and Library Services, a lot of what they would do is fund small projects like that that libraries could do that were theoretically reproducible. A lot of times, all the toolkits are released on Creative Commons licenses so that other libraries, if they see how it works, can do it. I do a lot of work on Wikipedia, and one of the things about those oral history projects, like Los Angeles Public Library, Schlesinger Library at Harvard did one with Black women. They just did a Black woman oral history project, and Rosa Parks was their big get. But they had tons of women who were Black, often business women or involved in the civil rights movement. And they would tell their stories, they would take photographs. It was like a really cool project. But the thing that was so extra cool about it wasn't just something that wound up in an archive somewhere. Like all of that content wound up available online, where it became source material that could become journalism. It can
Mhm.
become Wikipedia articles. It can become sort of our commonly community held knowledge and how we view ourselves in the larger picture of humanity, as well as just being a thing for the library so that the Los Angeles community can know more Los Angelinos.
Right.
It's available larger. So if any of those people, and now like, keyword searching, and I know people use AI for this. I'm still like a super AI skeptic, so it's not for me, but for other people, you can transcribe, you can have that information, like stuff that's locked up in podcasts that can then become available to people who read text, to people who only listen to it. It can be made available to many different people for many different reasons. I feel like generating that kind of what we call primary source documentation is one of the things that libraries are really poised to do if
Mm.
they decide to, if they think about it. Like bigger libraries, New York Public Library has huge digital photography archive, or not even digital photography, just digital images generally, right? A lot of their stuff that is pre, I think, 1927, 1928, I can't even remember the data. They just made sure that it's clear when you search it, you know that it's public domain so that you can share it, get access to it. If I may talk about like the Flickr Commons for like 1 second, like we have millions of photographs, some of which are put online by like tiny historical societies or tiny public libraries, but they put an open license on it and suddenly it's available to the world who can find it keyword searching on flickr.com, on Google, Chat GPT. I don't know if they know it or not. I'm hoping to both understand that and also fight it, but right now I'm still mostly fighting.
Yeah.
But I think that's like journalism and archives and museums and libraries and zoos. Again, fascinated by that. That's the great bridge, right? We
Mhm.
can have the events, generate the content, have the stuff. Journalists can write about it. I can almost look out my window and see the home of my newspaper editor because we still
Oh.
have a local newspaper in my
Uh,
town. It covers 12 towns, comes out once a week. But being able to have that for our community. So we do a thing at the library, it can make the paper. That then becomes a thing that is real according to Wikipedia, and it
mm.
becomes a true fact, not just a neat thing about our community. Both of those things are good. I don't mean to say if you don't have a local paper, you don't exist. But finding any kinds of local journalism that can take what's going on in libraries, even the small stuff, and make it more real helps everybody see what we've been talking about is we're all part of it. And I guess the outgoing ALA, American Library Association president, Emily Drabinski, is a definite socialist, very cool, came
Mm.
under fire for her beliefs in how people work together. She's a big union advocate too. And her big platform is like, we're stronger together. We're
Yeah,
absolutely stronger together. And I feel that's true with people in a workplace, but also true with these knowledge institutions in the information ecosystem that is a country. And
totally.
I think that's important.
Yeah, absolutely. I really like how local papers can help their libraries get onto the record and become part of the public consciousness. That's
So
a really
true.
cool idea.
And it doesn't even have to be print newspaper, right? We're seeing ProPublica just kill it every day with their original reporting. And there's tons of smaller projects like the one you work for that are great and really helping. The trick becomes getting good enough to wind up on Wikipedia's list of reliable sources so that people don't see you as somebody with an agenda is also worthwhile work. When you talk about
Mm.
what is the work, I see that as part of it, like figuring out how to help people talk about what's reliable and how to know things and whether you've looked something up and gotten good information. Journalism is part of that as well as chip in a day-to-day way. And yeah, I yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, totally.
I get all
It's
fired up.
Yeah, no, me too. It's lifting each other up and yeah, it's interacting with each other's work is more than just like keeping up. It's also reinforcing what people in the space are doing. I
Yeah,
like that.
yeah, I think
Um,
so. I'm gonna have to go soon-ish.
okay, let me look over my list of questions and see if I'm missing anything. So you were saying IMLS is what funded a lot of these kind of extra record creating projects. Have you seen any libraries trying to address a funding gap? Are there donation drive things going on? You talked earlier about celebrating community in a more literal way, and I think that is really important and something that gets ignored in knowledge spaces is inviting the public in and making it fun, which I think is what zoos and museums do really well. So I don't know, is there maybe people, libraries that are maybe throwing actual celebrations and using that as fundraising, or have you seen anything like that going on?
Yeah, I mean, library funding is so interesting because what's happening against libraries isn't so much about the funding, although it's a little bit about the funding, but it's a lot about what kind of books you're allowed to have, right? And the
Mm.
threat is funding later. But at the same time, it's really interesting because I'm mostly in rural Vermont libraries, and we are all in Vermont. Each library is individually funded by each town. And that funding happens once a year at town meeting. People vote like, yeah, we're going to fund it, or nah, no, we're not going to, along with other things in town like the cops and road crew. But in other states, most states, you get some funding from the state, right? So the state itself funds the libraries and then they decide what to do. It's hard to say without sounding like I'm being negative, but I find that libraries are often better at having stuff go on for the people who are already in the building, right? Like outreach is often more challenging because historically the library has been more about the building, right? One of my favorite libraries that has celebrated its community in a way that has always seemed fun to me from a distance is Ann Arbor Public Library in Michigan.
Mm.
Their summer reading program is for everybody in the community, right? It's not just kids. Summer reading has historically been like, if kids don't practice reading in the summer, their reading drops off and they come back to school and they forget. They lose some of the gains that they made from going through a year of school. And so that's fine. So we have summer reading for that. And also because it's excellent PR for the library. Summer reading is often fun. There's prizes. The library seems fun. It's a good time. But like Ann Arbor turned it into a whole summer reading extravaganza. They had, I don't know if they're still doing this. I haven't caught up with them this year, but like they have games, both online games and offline games. They have things at the library. They have scavenger hunts. They have lots of big events. And it's just a whole thing that goes the whole summer. And everything is sort of part of it. And we do that to a lesser extent at my library. Summer reading is mostly geared towards kids. There's a bunch of events that happen every week. Our theme is dinosaurs this summer. So we had a fossil thing at the library yesterday. If you're a parent, you've got kids at home, every week you could come and you know there's going to be a thing and you know it's going to be at the library. I feel
Mm,
like community celebrations get challenging because historically America's 250th. You would think the Library of Congress would be doing a big thing, or you would think the Smithsonian would. And then you look at what's been going on at both of those institutions, and they're having to just shovel shit being dumped on them from the administration. And it's frustrating for them because what they want to be doing is having some kind of huge party, having a thing that celebrates the things that are great about America, like 4th of July in my town, big parade, everybody
mhm,
goes. And there's definitely differences of opinion about whether you wave your American flag or not. Does that represent the current administration and all the terrible things that they're doing? Or does that represent
mm,
the ideals of the country that you wish you lived in, even though it was founded on slavery and a whole bunch of other things that are absolutely not okay and never were? But
mhm.
do you is it about the hope that you have for what the country could be based on the structure that theoretically should work for us and it turns out doesn't if somebody wants to break all the rules? I don't have an American flag at my house. I have a big flag of the globe because
Mm,
but with a big
mhm.
ice out sign in front of it because fuck those guys. So I don't see it as much as a fundraising thing, but the idea of celebrating the community you see a lot in Vermont with local libraries, but also local historical societies. We've got one, the town over from me, Brookfield, 900 people. They've got the Brookfield Old Town Hall, which is basically just what it sounds like, but it's right by the floating bridge in one of the most beautiful places in the state. And again, in the summertime, they're doing something there every weekend, or it feels
Mhm.
like every weekend. It's about the fossils or the repair fair or whatever. Because you don't just want to hang a sign out that says this is an excuse for community to get together. But
Right.
honestly, it's an excuse for community to get together. And the more we see our neighbors as part of the same ecosystem that sustains us, the more we want to help them the way we would want to help ourselves. And it's
Yeah.
weird because you have to almost not say it in order to be able to do it effectively. But, that's part of the interesting subtlety about working in the government, but for the community that makes the work so interesting, to me at least.
Yeah. That's really interesting working in the government, but for the community. I've heard that sentiment a lot with the ex-federal scientists, especially that I've interviewed, where it's like they were attached to government and some of them still have this like, well, I'm gonna get my job back and I want to be a part of government. But what they really are passionate about is the people and their local communities and then the broader national community, which I just think is so interesting, this kind of like brain split that has to happen when you're part of a government that is hostile to its own community.
Well, an executive branch that is kind of eating its own. I mean, I think
Right.
about the people that work for the national parks, right? Like
Hmm.
they love those jobs. And yet they have to struggle with the fact that their paycheck comes from people who really would prefer less access in general,
Yeah.
but to the parks, obviously. And it's tricky, right? Because I think in general, in America, like a lot of government mostly works, but what we've been seeing, especially in the last like 10 years, is the way people who don't care about the rules can make it work for them at the expense of other people, right? In Vermont, we're having to spend a whole bunch of time making laws to protect Vermonters in case the federal government removes even more protections for equal marriage, trans kids. I don't want to spend time doing that because it shouldn't be necessary. I want to spend the time doing that because I value myself, my neighbors, everybody. But it is weird. A lot of people who work in government are well-meaning bureaucrats who just want to help people. My partner has an adult son who deals with serious mental health challenges, and the Department of Mental Health and Social Security and the people who do food stamps have been incredibly helpful and kind and giving of themselves and their time in order to help Milo. And those people in the government, I want to see more of them, more of these people, less of these idiots. And I think the question a lot of people have is, okay, well, how do we do that? And where do we start?
What would be your answer to that?
Getting to know your neighbors, getting to know your community, figuring out what your capacity is, figuring out what you can give. This guy has become a local representative in my town to the state legislature. He doesn't have a lot of time to do it, but he has more time than me. He's able to go to meetings with people who you only agree with 95% of the time because you think the one trans kid who everybody had a shit fit about being in the locker room, everybody didn't have a shit fit about. One kid had a shit fit about it, and then it became a national thing because everybody got on Fox News and started fighting. Like, don't fight with people on the internet. Deal with the problems you have in your local community in real life. Call people out who are being terrible, which I think is hard because it means your neck gets stuck out, and that's dangerous. And I think
Yeah.
people worry, and not everybody has the capacity to be that person, right? And I get it. But we are seeing small bits of incremental change in a positive way in smaller areas. The question becomes, what next, right? I'm definitely not somebody who's like, donate to candidates. Not that they're not part of it, but there are a lot of ways to work the ground game, right? Get on your school board, get on your library board. No rest for bad politicians who are supporting unsupportable ideas and identities, but not where you're just angry on the internet, but where, we've got a local guy running for a local office who holds some really bad opinions. When it's time to vote, we're going to talk about those bad opinions, and he would probably prefer that we didn't, right?
Yeah.
But not being a jerk about it, being tactical so that
Right.
you can be like, actually, so and so supports this bad opinion. He should probably have to answer for that. So and so, what do you think about your bad opinion?
Hmm. Yeah. Here's your chance to change it.
Right. Maybe you don't agree with that anymore. Fine. Now's a chance to let us know. Otherwise, people should know you're that kind of guy when they go vote for you. But it's hard because it's a numbers thing, right? And if you're outnumbered and you live somewhere where you can't move, there's a lot of great stuff going on in Texas. And it's also really hard. And the plan can't be for everybody that doesn't agree with the politics of where Texas is going to move. Do have to think about ways to be strategic, to be tactical, maybe to be underhanded if you think that's the difference between people having basic civil rights that other people are trying to take away from that. I think there's some picture things. ICE is immoral. What's going on in the executive branch is unacceptable. Mitch McConnell has probably died. That kind of thing. And then there's the local ground game, going to the garden party, helping my guy get elected, being ready when there's larger change to know what to do when the time comes.
It can feel like there's nothing we can really do on the national level at this moment, but it's time to work the ground game because there are things you can do locally.
Yeah, be supportive of people and understand that not everybody has the same capacities, and that doesn't mean there aren't things everyone can do.
Yeah. Yeah, I like that. Do you think the reliance on IMLS or also the good people who are stuck in these bureaucratic systems that at the moment have a directive to do evil, do you think this kind of reliance on centralized government, on stuff like the IMLS, is that ultimately a weakness?
I mean, we didn't have IMLS for a long time, and we found ways to make it work. What IMLS does is it almost allows for focus on, like, in general, libraries are generalists, right? We try to get information to people in the ways we always have. IMLS can allow groups of people, either within libraries or museums or whatever, to focus on a thing, right? The Library Freedom Project, you can focus on privacy and helping people take control of their digital life, where you might not be able to get a bunch of people who could get together and agree to do that or have the free time. And so I think that's been a strength of IMLS, and I'm a supporter of IMLS. But my other feeling is, oh, yeah, what else you got? We did it before without you. If you take that away, we'll still be able to do what we're doing. And I have friends that work for IMLS, and I hope they continue to exist. It's a little awkward watching them pushing sort of propaganda machine kind of stuff. Not my
Mhm.
friends, but the sort of larger organization. Libraries have always been like mutual aid societies, right? Like, we could run with less, a lot less. We would prefer not to. We shouldn't have to, but the digital information sphere makes it more difficult for us to do as we wind up having to rent and not own as much of the content as we had. But I don't feel that there's been reliance on IMLS as much as its addition to the ecosystem allowed us to do more and do it better. I think that was incredibly important, but I don't think it's necessary. I think it's necessary for me in the world that I want to live in, but I
Yeah.
don't think it's like keeping the lights on. For me, my concerns are stuff like E-rate, because if a library has to suddenly start paying full price for its internet to serve a community dealing with institutionalized poverty, that's going to be a bigger blow than MLS helps fund a lot of the things our state library does. They administer the money thing is complicated, but it
Mhm.
does give money to states that they rely on for stuff like our summer reading program. So that's important and would be expensive otherwise. Libraries have always been sort of mutual aid machines, and that's not changing. It's going to be a lot more of a hassle. American Library Association is seeing some of these struggles. They are finding state library associations are being forced to not align with the American Library Association because of damaging narratives that terrible people have pushed about what kind of an organization the American Library Association is, which are completely false. It's hard to combat those narratives. I think the bigger concern is not so much the centralized money and support of programs and stuff that IMLS has, but the centralized idea of knowledge and information that we're finding with fewer and fewer media outlets, more and more people taking lockstep ideas from terrible people, and the consolidation of how we do other things, the Amazonification of commerce,
Mhm.
where I'm lucky I can go to a local hardware store. I've got a lot of local stores that I can interact with, or small bank, whatever. I used to have a small department store where I could go buy a pair of socks in town, and I don't have that anymore.
Mhm.
I think the consolidation of where I can get my stuff and where the people who sell the stuff can get their stuff and who's getting squeezed in order to make more money for whom is a thing that I think ultimately is even more dangerous than looking at some of the library support ecosystem, because I think it's also, haven't talked about this at all, but it's the capitalism run amok that's really one of the overarching project problems.
Yeah.
Like the capitalism run amok, the Christo fascists running amok, and the white nationalists running amok.
Yeah.
And see the little meme. It's the same picture. Yeah, it's all the same. It's the same group of people, and getting us mad about the wrong things so that we don't focus on the fact that they're just people, and
Mhm.
people can either change or not be in power anymore.